What's good, YouTube? It's me, back in another video. Today, let's talk about how to beat the Centurion deck. This is a very, very scary deck that is coming out of the side set Valiant Smashers, which just dropped, and they can actually Calamity Lock you with 1.5 cards. That's right. Off of any one card starter plus any discard, they're able to establish the Hot Red Calamity King, effectively skipping your entire turn. Now, before we talk about how to beat this deck, because it does have a lot of vulnerabilities, let's talk about how it functions. Essentially, these cards like to treat themselves as continuous trap cards, and when they are treated as continuous trap cards, they have the effect during the main phase of either player's turn to actually special summon themselves out. Since they're treated as continuous traps, their effects become quick effects, and when they special summon themselves out, they traditionally have a bunch of effects. For example, Centurion Primera is the main Stratos-like monster. When she's normal or special summoned, you can add any Centurion card from your deck to your hand, and then Centurion Trudea, when she is on the field, you can place herself and any Centurion monster from your deck as a continuous trap card. And these cards can both special summon themselves out as they're treated as a continuous trap card during either main phase. You can do this combo off of either of these cards or Stand Up Centurion, which is the in-engine field spell. But for the purpose of this combo, we'll just be demonstrating using these monsters because traditionally this is what they actually want to start with to optimize their lines. So if we're starting off with Trudea, it's very, very simple. They will be actually normal summoning her, using her effect to place herself as a continuous trap alongside another copy of Primera if they don't have it already. And then because Primera is treated as a continuous trap, she can actually special summon herself out, use the effect to add a copy of a spell or any trap. If they have another extender, sometimes they do go for the trap. There's a continuous Solemn Judgment-esque trap that negates any spell or trap or monster effect by sending a face-up monster from their spell and trap zone to the graveyard. Or there's actually also a pop trap as well that allows them to pop any monster on the field, or rather banish any monster on the field until the end phase. So for this combo, we are actually going to search the Stand-Up Centurion. This will then activate on the field. This effect says during the main phase, if this card was activated this turn, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard, place one Centurion monster from your deck as a continuous trap. So we can immediately do that. And then they would just discard a card and place their last monster, which is Centurion Emmett 6, which also has the effect to special summon herself out. But because she's a level 8, this is very, very significant because it combos well with Primera, who happens to be a level 4 tutor, in case you guys haven't noticed. Now, when this is special summoned out, you actually do link off directly into their signature synchro monster, Centurion Legatea, which allows herself to draw a card upon the special summon, and also says during the end phase, they can place one non-synchro Centurion monster from their hand or graveyard to the trap zone as a continuous trap. And all of this is made possible for them to Calamity Lock. In case you're curious, like how the heck do they Calamity from here? Well, Stand Up Centurion allows the owner to special summon, to synchro summon a monster whenever a monster is special summoned. So on their turn, obviously we're going to proceed to end phase, use the effect of Legatea, bring back the Primera, and then during the opponent's turn, they can actually special summon out the Primera, as well as either the Trudea or the Emmett 6. So if you go ahead and use the effect of Trudea, bring herself out, you can use the effect of Stand Up Centurion. Emmett 6 has an effect in the graveyard that can resurrect itself by placing one of their Centurions back in their spell and trap zone as a trap, thereby getting follow-up for the next turn, because we could just do it again. And then from there, they resolve the effect of Stand Up Centurion to actually go into Crimson Dragon. And when Crimson Dragon is special summoned, they can target the effect of the Legatea, return back to Crimson Dragon, and then summon out either the Hot Red Archfiend Calamity to lock you out of the turn, or in certain situations, they do summon out the Cosmic Blazer Dragon, which is just a generic Omni Negate, just like Baron de Fleur, but with a whopping 4,000 attack. So yes, this deck is very, very scary. Without further ado, let's talk about how to beat it with your hand traps and other board breakers. Alright guys, now let's talk about the cards that you can actually beat them with. But before I do so, I do have to point out one quick thing about Stand Up Centurion that I see a lot of players actually missing out. This card effect, the Ignition card effect that allows you to, during your main phase, send one card from your hand to the graveyard and place a Centurion monster directly from the deck as a spell and trap column, is actually only able to be activated during the turn that this card was activated. I'm already seeing a lot of players misplaying with this, using this heavily in the grind game. For example, if they already had it up from the previous turn, they're trying to use the effect of discard again and then place another Primera in their continuous trap as follow-up, and a lot of players are letting that go. But guys, don't forget that this is only during the turn it's activated where you can use that effect. So that's just one thing to keep your eyes on. Okay, now let's talk about the actual cards to beat it. Starting off with Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. This is a type of deck that's very control-esque, and they do rely heavily early on a lot of their starters, so Ash Blossom does get a lot of value. Now, there are a lot of builds actually making use of the Horus monsters because Imseti and the rest of the Horus cards actually allows them to set up, number one, a level 8 body, which is easy synchro material with Primera to go into Legatea, as well as the option to potentially go into a powerful rank 8. So if they go to something like a number 90 just to play around hand traps, that could definitely be something they start off with. So if they do start with Imseti, that's definitely something you want to Ash, because this deck does brick a lot. It's one of those decks that are very control heavy, a lot of hand traps and non-engine, and not a lot of engine and starters, so hitting one of the starters will be oftentimes enough to actually hurt them. Now, you know you guys can't actually Ash cards like Stand Up Centurion because it does place directly, so you cannot do that, but you can definitely obviously Ash the search effect of Primera, which I think I would personally do, because this deck, again, a lot of times they do rely on the one engine card to resolve, so if we can cut them off of Stand Up Centurion access, then that means that they may not be able to go into their Legatea and further their plays. Another key card that you can actually hit against the Horus engine specifically is the Zombie Vampire. Yes, a lot of players will be playing this card because it allows them to dig for the Centurion engine. A lot of times you might whiff, not see any Centurion monsters, and then actually just go into the Zombie Vampire off the Horus engine to try and go ahead and dig for them. So this is definitely something that you can Ash, because they would have no reason to make this if they already had Centurion monsters, right? They would just instead go into something like Galaxy Eyes, Photon Lord, or Hope Harbinger. So that's just definitely some cards to be aware of. Another thing that you should definitely Ash are the Paw cards. Obviously, this deck can play a lot of Paw cards. A lot of players will be playing Desires. Some, I imagine, will be playing Prosperity, but personally, I don't think it's that great because it does conflict with the draw effect of Legatea. But if they are playing Prosperity and they prosper 6, that's definitely something else you could hit as well. I'm not sure if anyone's going to be crazy enough to play Extravagance, but that is another card that you could definitely hit as well. Anything that lets them go consistency, a lot like against Kashira, just hit that thing immediately. Next is Drone Lockbird. This card is just not very good against this deck because they don't do a lot of adding. In the rare cases where they actually do start adding and you cut them off with Drone Lockbird, that's really just going to trade 1-for-1 with something like a Legatea effect, which doesn't really matter. They're still going to be able to set up the Calamity Lock regardless if they got to this point, even if they didn't draw a card, right? So personally, Drone Lockbird for me is a no bueno against this deck. Definitely not something you probably want to main deck immediately in the upcoming format, but I think, you know, still on the side, you just don't want to bring it against this deck specifically. Now, there is one hand trap that we are forgetting about, and that's actually Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. This has been a forgotten hand trap for some time now because it's just not been very effective against the rest of the metagame. But against this deck, it's spectacular because you have a lot of things you can hit, including the effects. While they're treated as continuous trap cards, to special summon themselves back during the main phase. Ghost Ogre is actually a great card you can actually draw as your 6th card because they will have Primera and Legatea in their spell and trap zone. So using the effect of Primera during your main phase, you can just chain Ghost Ogre to actually attempt to pop it. Now, one thing to note is that the effect of Stand Up Centurion says that it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effect while you control a Centurion monster card, which includes both monster cards on the monster zone as well as a continuous trap card zone because they're still treated as monster cards, not monsters. So be aware about using Ghost Ogre on Stand Up Centurion. You should only attempt to do that when they do not have any Centurion monster cards on the field anywhere, including the monster zone or the spell and trap zone. So that's just one thing to keep note of. The other thing that you should be aware of is there are some other things like Centurion Primera being treated as a continuous trap. Level 5 or higher Centurion monsters cannot be destroyed by card effects either, so trying to Ghost Ogre Legatea won't work at all. And Legatea, of course, has the effect where your opponent's your monsters with 2,000 or less attack cannot actually be destroyed by battle. So there are some hidden effects there that you just have to be aware of, especially when using cards like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. So just make sure you are using it on a monster card effect in the spell and trap column, or better yet, a Stand Up Centurion if they happen to be starting with it. Another card you can actually hit as well is King's Sarcophagus, just to cut them off of the Horus access so they don't make something like Galaxy Eyes, Sultan Lord, or Zombie Vampire to try and dig in their Centurion engine. So that's definitely something you can hit if they do start off with it, in my opinion. Nibiru is unfortunately not great against this deck. Why? Well, because the core combo actually does end in about 4 summons. They do normal summon the Primera or the Legatea, and then they consecutively special summon the Primera, so that's 2 summons. And then with the Emmet, they'll actually go up directly to a 3rd summon, and then off that combo, they just go into Legatea, which is the 4th summon. But that doesn't mean it's completely dead. There are instances where they will be playing non-engine monsters that count towards their summons, like Fenrir, for example. That would just make 5 summons on the Legatea. There are also the Horus monsters, of course, right? The summoning out the Horus guys is just something that you should be aware of. If they're going to the Zombie Vampire play, that's really, really good for Nib. But if they're going into the Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord, it makes Nib a lot worse because they can just negate it. So that's just one thing to keep note of. Personally, I wouldn't keep in Nib against this deck nor side it in. It doesn't really contribute to stopping the Calamity Lock, and they can easily play around it. But if it's in your main deck, just, you know, keep an eye out on the summon count and just use it whenever you can to bait anything out by all means possible. Dimensional Shifter's not the best against this deck because they're an anti-meta deck themselves that plays a lot of hand traps and non-engine, and they don't really care about their stuff getting banished because they are still going to be able to go into huge Legatea and then draw further adding cards to their hand, but it does stop the Calamity Lock, right? Like, these guys will be banished instead of actually coming back to the continuous trap zone because Legatea says you can actually target a monster card in your graveyard or hand to place there. Now, if they don't have a graveyard, that means these cards are not coming back, which means they're not going to be able to make Crimson Dragon on our turn, and they're not going to be able to follow through with the Calamity Lock. So if you already have Shifter in your side deck, that's definitely something you could add in just to prevent the Calamity Lock from all means possible from happening, because this is basically the deck's main win condition. A lot of times they do actually turtle up with hand traps and Fenrir and potentially Legatea or Cosmic Blazer Dragon, but that's not always going to be enough against your engine. So if you do have the Shifter down as an extra added layer of protection to prevent the Calamity from happening by all means possible, I would definitely say go for it and add it in if you have the space. Now talking about Infinite Impermanence and Effect Veiler, and of course Ghost Mourner, because these cards always have a lot of application against this deck. Now, the one thing you have to note about Centurions is, again, they are a heavy anti-meta deck that's very reliant on the normal summon, so you definitely want to hit, by all means possible, any of their starters. I'm talking about cards like normal summon Trudea, or lines where they go normal summon Primera even. I would definitely Veiler, Imperm, or potentially Ghost Mourner here. That's really important. Now, the one thing that you can actually do with Infinite Impermanence and Ghost Mourner, which is really cool while drawing it on your turn for the 6th card, is actually using it effectively against what they're trying to set up, which is the Crimson Dragon. So during our main phase, they're going to go into the Crimson Dragon after we make our first play, and then from here we actually have turn player priority to activate in triggers. So this is where you can best drop the Ghost Mourner, because what does that mean? You might think it's bad. You're like, oh yeah, they can use the effect of Crimson Dragon rather to chain and dodge, right? But it doesn't matter, because one thing you have to know about Archfiend Calamity is that this is actually an effect that can miss timing. It says when this card is synchro summoned, you can activate this effect. For the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects on the field, which means it's a when, so it has to be summoned as a Chainlink 1. If it's not summoned as Chainlink 1, that means that you will not be able to activate the effect of Calamity. So in this case, what does that mean? Well, we're going to go Chainlink 1 Ghost Mourner or Chainlink 1 Impermanence, target the Crimson Dragon. They're going to be forced to chain the Crimson Dragon as Chainlink 2. They cannot go into the Calamities because this would be summoned out as Chainlink 2, and they would miss timing. Instead, they're going to go into the Cosmic Blazer Dragon if they know what they're doing, because this is just an Omni Negate. So it's still not the best thing for us to happen, because we're kind of like negging one card, and they still get the Cosmic Blazer as an added layer of Omni Negate, but that's still a lot better than getting locked out by Calamity Dragon, right? Like, we can still have a chance at playing. So that's just one thing to make sure you're aware of using the Infinite Impermanence and the Ghost Mourner. But just beware that Emmet 6 in the graveyard at any point in time means that they can actually dodge these cards that target their other Centurion monsters, because this card has a quick effect. While it's in their hand or graveyard, they can target a Centurion monster they control except Emmet 6 and place it face up in their spell and trap zone as a continuous trap, then special summon out this card. So that means you would lose the target for the Infinite Impermanence or the Ghost Mourner. So just be aware of that anytime they have Emmet 6 in the graveyard during our turn specifically, right? So, but I would still say these cards are absolutely amazing against the deck. Just using them on the normal summons is very backbreaking. Next is DD Crow. This card is just, it's not great against this deck, but it does have a lot of application, especially when they go for the traditional line where they set up the Centurion Emmet 6 into the graveyard. So you know what? I rescind what I said about not being that great. It's actually decent, because you can prevent them from bringing back the Emmet 6, which means that they're not going to be able to easily make the Crimson Dragon, because they will be missing a level 8 meaty body for the non-tuner synchro requirement, right? And the other thing is we can also hit the secondary Horus monster that they're trying to resurrect. So if they go something like M-SETI, add the Sarcophagus, activate it, and then we're like, oh, okay, you can bring back your M-SETI, and then when they use the effect to discard to try and send a Happy or something else, we can just hit them with a DD Crow there where it actually hurts a lot, so they're not going to be able to go into the rank 8 play. So you know what? DD Crow is actually okay against this deck. It's not amazing, but it's okay because it prevents Calamity Lock and it stops a lot of their lines that actually start their combos. So yeah, I definitely say you could side this card in if you want to. Now let's talk about some board breakers. Cosmic Cyclone is obviously very effective against this deck because it's very reliant on the continuous spell cards and trap card effects, right? As we've seen, you know, using Cosmic Cyclone on something like a stand-up Centurion is absolutely backbreaking because they're negging a card to actually activate the effect. You can also, as the 6 card drawn during your turn for Cosmic Cyclone, hit the monsters that are treated as continuous trap cards, so Centurion Primera, so they can't use the effect to add on the special summon either, or Centurion Tradea potentially. You can also hit the stand-up Centurion because this is the one trigger effect that actually allows them to start synchro summoning off, right? So preventing that from happening is very, very useful as well. Or even hitting something like a King Sarcophagus, so their horse monsters are just left to rot away in the graveyard forever. So Cosmic Cyclone is definitely a good one. It has a lot of crossover going first against purely decks, against a lot of other decks like Unchained as well. So I would definitely side this card if you have the space. Lightning Storm is just not very good against this deck. Well, why? Because if you're going in your main phase and you activate Lightning Storm, call spells and traps, then they just chain the effects to special summon themselves out as monsters. If you use the effect to call monsters and try to pop the Legatea, well, unfortunately, when Trudea, or rather Primera, is treated as a continuous trap, level 5 or higher Centurion monsters they control cannot be destroyed by card effects, so Lightning Storm effectively does nothing. Don't play this card, guys. There are quick effects that are actually very good, like Forbidden Chalice, Forbidden Droplet, and to an extent, cards like Book of Moon and potentially Book of Eclipse. These cards are all decently effective because of what we previously talked about with the fact that Calamity Archfiend is actually a quick effect, right? And, if we have something like a Book of Moon and we use the effect to target the Crimson Dragon, then they're going to be forced to chain that to special summon out something like a Cosmic Blazer, but they'll not be able to summon out the Calamities because it will miss timing, as it would be special summon off of a special summon chain link 2 or higher. So that's just one thing to keep track of. Obviously, using effects like Forbidden Chalice are very, very useful because we can use it against the Crimson Dragon entirely and just stop them from tagging out, which is very, very nice. Same thing with Droplet. When they use the effect, we can wait till the last possible moment and use it to chain and hit the Crimson Dragon, and from there on, they actually cannot bring out the Calamities. So that's very, very positive in our favor. And then board breakers like Triple Tactus Talent and Triple Tactus Rust, while they may be live because they will be using the effects of Primera to probably search for follow-up during the main phase, it all depends what the rest of your hand is. Because if you're not able to prevent the Calamities from coming out, then Thrust and Talents effectively are duds in your hand. You have to have another card to effectively nullify them from getting out the Calamities, and then from there, board breakers like Talents and Thrust will actually be really, really compatible. But if you guys don't have any other cards to side in, I'd say keep them in. If you have cards to side in and top of them, then definitely take these out for cards that can prevent the Calamity Lock and allow us to keep playing. And that's also why other board breakers like Dark Ruler No More and to an extent Evenly Matched are just not very good against this deck because all of their effects are fast effects, and if they are Calamity Locking us, then we're not going to be able to do anything. And also, even if they have the Cosmic Blazer Dragon, this card actually banishes itself for cost to negate a card effect, so that's very, very nice in their favor, meaning it won't be on the field for you to get rid of with something like an Evenly Matched. They can just bring it back in the end phase, assuming they survive, and continue to play the game from there because this card just continuously negates, and it has a whopping 4,000 attack. So yeah, that's all about it for Centurion. If you guys have anything that we missed in this video that you think is actually very effective against the deck, definitely let us know in the comments below. Other than that, please subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.